This happened to me when I was 19 at my local McDonald's back in 2009. I've done tons of under the table stuff like a bouncer, a babysitter, and even a waiter. These were all jobs that were simple enough, and I figured working at McDonald's would be no different. I had worked the early morning shifts with one of my coworkers named Emma. Sometimes we'd have to get there at really early hours of the morning to get everything set up. One morning, I arrived to work a bit earlier than usual as I was the one with the keys and wanted to get a head start. As I'm getting out of my car, I notice a woman in a raincoat standing by the front door holding a bag. She immediately asks if we were open, and I politely tell her no and that she'd have to come back later. She gives me this upset frown and walks away in anger, just like a child would when they can't have a toy. It was weird, but there were a lot of weird people in the area at the time, so it wasn't uncommon. I go inside and Emma comes in shortly after to help refill sauces and napkins so that we could get ready to open. It's around 3:15 a.m. and Emma and I are wiping down tables when I see the woman from before looking inside with this menacing grin. I was shocked to see her, and so was Emma. "Abby, who is that?" she asked. I tell her that I didn't know and that she was probably just waiting until we opened. We finish wiping down the tables and we're ready to open, but our policy states that we couldn't open until the given time, which is 4 a.m. in Canada. With basically nothing left to do at this point, we go to the back and play some games on our phones when I hear a loud crash. I see that the front glass door is now shattered and the woman from before is stepping inside with a hammer. I tell Emma to hide while I grab the bat we kept under the counter, yelling at her to leave. She refuses to comply and she comes charging at me with the hammer. Expectedly, she misses me while falling to the floor, giving me and Emma time to get out. We are outside on the phone with the police and the woman is still inside damaging things while screaming. The nearest police station was only a few blocks away, so they were able to come within a matter of minutes. Now this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. We see a police cruiser pull up to the McDonald's and two police officers step out. One of them being male and the other one female. They go inside and they're instantly met with the deranged woman face to face. By now, they're ordering her to drop the hammer and she's screaming louder than I heard before. The woman charged at the female officer with full force and knocked her out cold. The male officer then tases the woman and she suddenly stops screaming. After a while, there were several police units on standby and an ambulance for the badly injured officer. Turns out, this woman is a violent schizophrenic and hasn't been taking her meds. She's been in and out of jail several times for assault and battery as well as theft. She's extremely messed up in the head and was taken to a mental institution to get the help she needed. The McDonald's remained closed for about a week after that, with my manager allowing us to get paid during that time. This is by far my scariest incident that's ever taken place during my time working at McDonald's. I've had other experiences, but this one takes the prize. I've been working at my local McDonald's for 4 years now, and it's one of the most annoying jobs I've ever had. People coming in left and right and through the drive-thru with orders piling up was honestly enough to make the average worker irritated. I sure as hell had to go through it all, and there would even be times where I couldn't finish up customers' orders. If you've ever worked at McDonald's, you get where I'm coming from. This happened around a year ago, right before the pandemic hit, and I was working overnight shift on front counter. I usually work in the kitchen on overnight, so I had no interactions with any customers until then. I was working a 7-hour shift, which was a usual overnight shift for us. It was around 9 p.m. and I had just finished putting in a customer's order when I noticed a man talking to a young boy near the play area. Yes, we were still one of the few restaurant chains that still actually had one. The man is kneeled down to the little boy's height, and right away the boy seemed very uncomfortable. I dismiss it as the boy probably having a rough day with who I assume was his father trying to calm him down. I remained focused on putting in customers' orders and try not to interfere with whatever was going on. Suddenly, the man grabs the boy's arm and they're heading in the direction of the front door that leads out into the parking lot. At that point, I couldn't keep my mouth shut and was about to say something when I hear someone yell, "Hey, what the hell are you doing with her son?" Just then, the mother comes out of the restroom and the man is petrified. His face was pale and his eyes were as big as saucers and tried to cover it up by saying, "Oh, this is your child. I'm so sorry. He looked lost and I was just trying to help him find his parents." His mumbles and incompetent use of wording clearly gave away as to what he was actually trying to do. The mother gave him an uncomfortable smile that had "Stay the hell away from my kid" written all over. Police were called, but I wasn't sure if he was caught or not. Before I go on with my story, I want to point out that this may not be the most scariest action-packed story ever. It is, however, one of, if not the most creepiest experience of my entire teenage life. I was 19 at the time, and my friends and I had just seen the new Joker movie in theaters, a film that 100% deserves an award for. It was me, my friend Brian, and my other friend, Corey. Corey then decided that he wasn't hungry and took an Uber back home, leaving me with Brian. We looked around the area for some good restaurants we thought seemed affordable for us. After searching for nearly an hour, we decided to go to McDonald's for dinner. I know, not the best food to have for dinner, but we were dirt poor college students and couldn't afford to eat at one of the more nicer restaurants. We go inside and Brian and I order our food and look for a table. It was around 11 at night, so the McDonald's wasn't too crowded. We eventually settled with a booth right next to the window, and at this point, Brian and I are stuffing our mouths with chicken nuggets. Call us fat asses or whatever you want, the food was amazing. Anyway, we're both sitting down eating our food when I notice a man a table down looking at us. He looked to be a middle-aged Cuban guy wearing a black jacket and some sunglasses. The strange thing about it was that he had nothing on his tray except for a few napkins. Even with his sunglasses on, I could tell he was looking at us and just ignored him by talking to Brian. I text Brian to look at the guy behind him, and he then knows that he was staring at us. Suddenly, the man gets up from his seat and walks over to us and asks us if we could help him fix a broken water pump. We get these confused looks on our faces and tell him that we couldn't as we had to go soon. Yeah, but it'll only take a second, he said. I apologize and tell him that we couldn't, but to maybe call someone that could, like a mechanic. This doesn't seem to faze him, as he keeps persuading us to help him no matter how many times we said no. Eventually, I raise my voice telling him to please leave us alone, and then he turns his head left and right and says 5 words that still freaks me out till this day. You made a smart choice, kids. He then walks away and out of the McDonald's and gets into his car and drives off. Legitimately freaked out at this point, we finish our food and walk out of the restaurant driving off. I still think about this story from time to time, and what would have happened had we gone with him to fix his water pump. When I was about 24, I worked the early morning shift as a cashier at my local McDonald's in Florida during the winter. Life was kind of what you'd expect for Florida. It's hot and humid, and you'd occasionally get your brief cold fronts. I had moved down to Miami for college and attended a school just outside of the city. But seeing as I didn't have enough money for college, I had to take out a student loan and pay it off by getting a job at McDonald's, which was and is the worst job a person could have. Anyway, as previously mentioned, I had worked the morning shift from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. as a cashier. I know it's not the best position in the world, but as long as the money was involved, any job was good enough. It was just me and my 2 coworkers, and I only considered one of them as a friend. One morning, I had arrived to the McDonald's before my other coworker, who had the key, so I was forced to wait outside in the cold until she arrived. So I'm leaning against my car, scrolling through Twitter and whatnot, when I see a man in a black raincoat approach the front doors. He cups his hand on the glass, looking inside, and I tell him that we were closed and that he'd have to come back later. He turns to face me and says, "Could you please just open the door and let me inside? I just want a coffee." I tell him that we were closed once again and that we wouldn't be open for another 2 hours, but told him that I would be glad to serve him later. He starts giving me this look I can't even describe. I guess it was a look of disappointment to some extent, but he then started walking away, disappearing into the night. It seemed as if he took the hint and decided not to cause any trouble. Finally, my coworker pulls in and she opens the door for us when I see the guy in the raincoat approach us again. We get inside and lock the door. When he got to the door, he starts pounding on the glass with his fists, demanding that we get his coffee. It was at that point when I realized that he was holding something behind his back, which he clearly didn't want us to see. My fear was that it was a gun, but whatever it was surely meant he was up to no good. Suddenly, I hear the glass shatter and I see him stepping into the store with a miniature axe. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach, and I told my coworker that we had to leave through the back door. She complied and we both left as this man tried to run after us. Thankfully, there was a police officer on duty on the other side of the street that saw the whole thing unfold. The officer followed us into the McDonald's with his gun drawn, but like in most situations like this, the man was gone. The glass doors had been shattered and the registers had been opened. I'm not sure if he was ever caught, but I like to think he was. It's been 4 years now, and I no longer work at McDonald's.